But first, I'm so excited to introduce this panel, some of New York's top VCs, to discuss the AI revolution. And to moderate the panel, I'd like to introduce my friend, Morgan Blumberg from M13.
Thank you so much. All right, guys, come on out. Great to be here today, and thank you to A.Teams for hosting. This is so fun to be here in the community here in New York. I want to pass it down the line and have everyone just introduce themselves. We've got a great panel, and then we'll hop into some questions. Want to start off with your intro?
Is that me?
You.
I like this. It feels like a rock band kind of thing, right? Very nice. Hi, everyone. I'm Matt Turck. I'm a partner at FirstMark. We are an early stage venture firm based right here, a few blocks away. We do both consumer and enterprise. I personally spend most of my time in the world of enterprise with a particular predilection for data, machine learning, and AI. So I actively invest in the space. For what it's worth, I blog about the space. I do one of these like crazy little eye charts where you have like all the logos to try and make sense of the data and machine learning landscape. And then I also run Data-Driven NYC, which is a big meetup right here in New York, to which you're all welcome to attend. The next one is on May 16.
Awesome.
I did my plug in like the first 2 minutes.
Great. Is this working? Cool. Hey, I'm Madison. I'm an investor in data and AI. Very early stage, look at pre-seed and seed mostly. My fund is Costanoa, based out in Palo Alto, but I'm based out in New York. We have a little bit of a New York AI community we've been putting together with developers, founders, investors, which has been a lot of fun, called New York City AI Builders. And previous to this, I'm coming from a career in data science and machine learning. So that's where I spent most of my time, the majority of it at Meta.
Hey everyone, I'm Grace Isford, a partner at Lux Capital. Thanks so much for putting this on and coming out today, especially on a gorgeous NYC sunny day. So thanks for being inside. But Lux Capital is an early stage venture fund. We invest in the future. So cutting edge tech at the intersection of tech and science. So everything from the computational sciences like AI, ML, to the life sciences like biotech and digital health, and the physical sciences, so space and defense and robotics, and the intersection of all of those. So particularly excited where AI is meeting some different areas. We were fortunate to be early partners to some really awesome AI ML companies. We led the Series A of a company called Hugging Face, which is kind of like the GitHub for ML. Seed, a partner since the seed, and a company called Runway ML, who I work closely with, who co-authored Stable Diffusion. Mosaic ML, who is helping folks train models. But we invest across all stages with a focus on the early stage.
Awesome, thank you. So we've got an excellent panel up here today, and we want to pick their brains on sort of the entire sort of generative AI stack as investors are thinking about it today. So kind of starting from the foundational level, would be really curious, especially in light of what's come out recently from Google, how you guys are thinking about the open versus closed debate and sort of where that leaves opportunity or no opportunity for new entrants.
I can start. I mean, I think there's two layers to this, right? There's the open versus closed model. So are you doing OpenAI, like a closed model, or the open source infrastructure? So are you self-hosting your own models and running it yourself, or are you using another infrastructure provider to do that? So I think there's two kind of layers we could discuss. I'm obviously biased. The companies I all just named are big proponents of the open source ecosystem. So Hugging Face had their big open source meetup with over 5,000 folks. We've been working closely with a bunch of companies that co-authored Stable Diffusion as well. So I think there's a lot of parallels between the AI ecosystem and the open source ecosystem, cutting edge tech, bottoms-up adoption, community adoption. Do I think there will only be open source models? No. But I think in general, I'm a proponent of the ecosystem that way. And sorry for the echo here.
I'll jump in there. So open source is an absolutely critical channel for data science, AI innovation. It has been for a long time. We have a number of investments in the space and are very involved in a lot of the open source communities. That being said, I think it's really important to acknowledge that open source has a lot of drawbacks in the industry. I do think that there are, it does pose a lot of production risk when you are an enterprise thinking about leveraging open source, a lot of security issues, especially OpenAI is a great example. I think it has brought such incredible, their initial open source efforts brought a lot of incredible innovation to this space. And as we've started to close source and really start to think about the impact of that, seeing a lot of security issues, and that's something that enterprises need to think very carefully about. So, a lot to think about, but open source and closed source provide a really nice tension with one another and help to just speed up or accelerate the innovation today. And so excited for the two to continue to grow and support both sides.
That was kind of crazy, by the way, this whole Google memo thing where, you got to love it, right? Like there's just one person, anonymous at Google, that says we have no moat. And then one person out of 150,000, 90,000 at Google. And then like overnight, it's like, oh, no, Google has no moat. Like, it's I don't know. Like how quickly those narratives take hold is always amazing to me. Having said that, like, so you all saw that, right? There was like this memo that circulated where basically people, like somebody anonymously said that neither OpenAI nor Google had any kind of advantage, and that open source would eventually win, which is what we're talking about here. So yeah, I generally agree. I think AI comes from open source mostly, like its roots. The reason why we're having this conversation in the first place is because Google in 2017 decided to publicly publish the Attention is All You Need paper, which was Transformers and the root of this whole generative AI thing. So AI comes from open source, and I think eventually open source always wins. It may take time, and I'm saying open source collectively wins, not necessarily one product. So I think this is the way this is going to go. I'm actually not sure that all those big those closed OpenAI type models actually really have defensibility long term. In part because a lot of the people that create those products tend to then leave and go to the next company and sort of bring all their learnings with them. Yes, exactly. So it's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out. Yes. Actually, did not read it to the end.
The one thing, though, I wouldn't underestimate on the closed models that I think about a lot is just the data and the compounding feedback loop that OpenAI is seeing every day from your ChatGPT usage. And so that's something that to get the model to be better, just getting that constant human feedback in particular is super important. And so I think that's an advantage that they will continue to have for at least the short term.
And as we just sort of talked about this, like the open source has this really good advantage in terms of virality factor, and on the closed side, lots of funding and this compounding data moat. How do you think about new entrants coming in to build foundational models? Do we need more of these foundational models? Is there still an opportunity for investment there from your perspective, or how do you think about that?
So foundation models is not generally a space that I'm specifically looking to invest in. I wrote a thesis a while ago and have continued to stick to it that I think there's a huge opportunity in the proprietary data and enabling enterprises to build their own foundation models, be it really large language models that are specific to your domain, be it smaller tasks that will help to distill some of these smaller automated tasks that we need to get done through agents. But all of that, I think, is infrastructure that will likely become more enterprise-driven. And so ultimately, I don't think there's a huge opportunity. And I would very much agree. I don't think the moat is in foundation models to this day. However, very much believe there will be more foundation models. There will be many different differentiations on them. And the more you build into a domain, the more of an opportunity there is.
And on that point specifically, I think I know where Madison stands on this, but do you see enterprises, and I think it's really exciting for this audience to think about enterprises building their own LLMs? Do you see them leveraging sort of existing LLMs? And what does that mean from the infrastructure required, as you sort of alluded to, around sort of personalizing these LLMs for enterprise, specifically thinking about the security concerns, thinking about domain specific? How are you guys thinking about that future?
I think there's a lot of things that still need to be built. And it sounds like we have many different enterprise folks in the audience today. How do you actually know where the data is going? If it's a closed model, is it being hosted on your own server or not? Mosaic works closely with a lot of companies who are worried about concerns like that. And so how can you actually run it yourself versus kind of outsourcing that to someone else, and also using your own data that stays on your own server versus going elsewhere or kind of going into the vortex of OpenAI? So I think it's critical, but beyond that, stuff that Madison said earlier, right, around role-based access, all the typical security authentication things you have in normal enterprise, you'll need to have for a lot of large language model infrastructure.
Yeah, I think in the enterprise, we're going to have this kind of polyglot model where we're going to have lots of different things, lots of different types of models. So yes, you'll probably import or use some level of OpenAI kind of thing. But more to the point, you'll need specific models that help you do discrete tasks. In some ways, the fact that, I don't know, ChatGPT can speak Polish doesn't really help you if you're trying to make sense of financial data, right? So you'll have your own model and your own data. You'll import industry-specific models. You'll use ChatGPT for certain things. So I think it's going to be really fun, exciting. And so, yes, there is an opportunity to build a stack around this. I guess we can talk about it.
Yeah. We can turn to sort of like that infrastructure layer stack now as well. Now that we sort of kind of alluded to it. I don't know how you guys are, like, one thing I'm thinking about infrastructure is who are the people that are actually working with these models in 10 years? Is it the developers? Is it people who are less technical? And kind of how does that relate to the types of tools that need to be built? Is there more room for a low-code or no-code tool, or do you think it needs to be developer-centric? Or how do you think that plays out from the types of tools?
Because I'm the only person who's
on mic, so you're up.
on this. Sorry, I was making fun of them for not having a mic. Your question was who uses the products. I think, look, I think it's just software. So you end up with the same exact thing as currently. So you have products that are specific for developers, and then you have a bunch of like no-code type of products. So I think I'm always of two minds. I'm like super excited about generative AI and all the things. I do think is super disruptive. It's fascinating. At the same time, it's like I've been at Firstmark for 10 years. It's my third hype cycle around AI. There was one in like sort of 2013, 14, right after neural networks, one ImageNet in 2012. Then crypto came in, and then 15, 16 there was like another one around chatbots, and then crypto came back in. And now we're like back on the third one. And yes, it is like, look, all the things, it's amazing, but ultimately it is software. We're going to use it for the same kind of like use cases, but there's a few things that were not possible. And then like the infrastructure, yes, there's going to be like different types of tools. It's like more or less the same thing at the end of the day. Like I don't think, ML ops versus LLM ops, that's going to be like of course, a bunch of vendors are going to talk about LLM ops. People like me will do, like I'll do in my landscape, I'll do a little box for LLM ops because you have to, but ultimately it's sort of like, the same just general direction.
Well, I'm happy to share my mic.
Sorry about that. I think there's two really interesting things there. First, to address the LLM ops point, I think it's interesting. I mean, I remember actually first met Matt in like the data ops era, where in reality there was all these companies that were funded, right? And then like only in reality like a few have really taken the lion's share of value. Like there was like 10 different like data quality or reliability companies, for example. And you see the same thing happen with ML ops. I'd argue there's probably 3 to 5 companies you want to be invested in, and they'll probably capture the lion's share of the data. Of course, we could argue about that, but there's going to be a lot of other players beyond. You'll probably see a similar phenomena happen here, right? Where, okay, there's a lot of really cool LLM infrastructure companies, but in reality, a few actually end up taking the lion's share. Not to mention the cloud providers are building their own suite of tools to try to compete and kind of cut your costs there. The one piece on profile I wanted to touch on, I have been fascinated to see a little bit of the decrease of importance of the ML engineer within organizations. So historically, you'd always think, okay, ML ops, to deploy ML in an organization, you had to have this like team of 10, 15 ML engineers. And now all of a sudden we're seeing this kind of increase of Python adoption. A lot of developers who don't have really, in-depth data science or ML experience coming in and picking up these tools. And pretty much every engineer I know is hacking on some AI side project, even if they're, your run-of-the-mill front-end or back-end engineer. And so I think that's changing the game, and something I'm watching closely to think about, what are the frameworks and how complex will the real backends be versus how much complexity will be abstracted away by companies, many of which you might plug into an API to get kind of that AI access.
So I'll come at this from my buyer history when I was head of data science previous. I always found it very challenging to look at no-code solutions. And every time we tried to implement them, work with business stakeholders to get them embedded and really push the limits of what was feasible, it was always a nightmare, time and time again, just a constant nightmare of, great, so we pushed the limits, you can't actually do what you wanted to do with it, and now we need to go and pull in a couple of different technical engineers to go and customize some of the parameters, get into the back end and figure out if it's possible to tweak it. So that for me has been a bias that has just stuck with me through investing. And I definitely think there are opportunities for no code. I don't think that it's quite as big as the one for low code and high code tools. So I will definitely continue to be most excited by developer centric tooling. And I believe that, AI innovation is just going to keep requiring more technical expertise, and we'll continue to have developers pushing that forward, of course, with tooling and features that help to make that accessible to business stakeholders as well.
So kind of closing out sort of our stack conversation, talking about the application layer. I think one big question that we've been tossing around a lot is just sort of where do new entrants stand a chance versus these big incumbents who are not sleeping on generative AI, incorporating into their products already from a use case perspective. Do you guys feel like there's certain sectors or certain wedges that really give new entrants a leg up over incumbents, or how do you think about that?
The application layer, I think so. The sort of the cool thing to say has been, all these application companies are just like thin layers on top of GPT, and therefore they're terrible and they don't stand a chance. I have a little bit of a different view. I just look at them more like a SaaS company, like an AI-powered SaaS company, and they're not more or less defensible than your average SaaS company. If you look at a SaaS company over time, the way they build differentiation is through great execution, building community, iterating, going fast, like all those things. So I think we should think about it the same way. So look, is Jasper defensible and not defensible? I'm using them as an example. Like I don't know them. I think they just need more time on Earth. They need time to just like build that community, that reputation, that logo wall. And so, yes, I do think you can build interesting application layer companies.
I definitely agree. Obviously, as you have heard in my previous answers, I believe that incumbents and existing enterprises have a really big advantage here. Anyone who owns a problem and a solution and builds that reinforcement learning feedback loop, be it tasks or humans or data collection to do so, I think has a really big advantage. But in that vein, anyone who is jumping into building a startup and can go and tackle that problem and solution ultimately, has an opportunity to do so. Some of the markings that I'm looking for that I think really show us where markets, that I think is a market framework, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this, are spaces where there are a lot of competitive legacy companies that don't use as much technology, that have very similar offerings with more of a brand attached. I think those that are competing on a cost optimized or marginal cost optimized business with very limited difference between user experience leaves for an opportunity for a significantly better user experience that can be abstracted on top of all those decision-making frameworks. So ultimately, I think there's a number of ecosystems like, say, travel, maybe e-commerce as well, where there are opportunities to build over it and enable better decision making, but it all comes back to having really great domain expertise. And I think Runway, Lux's company, is a really great example of where innovation can be possible.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what both of you said. I think the things I'd add, I've been obsessed with like who has unique data capture. So it's one thing to have unique data. That's awesome. That's like table stakes. But do you have, unique subterranean sea data or bio data or data that is siloed that no one else has access to because you're the only way you can collect that? At the end of the day, that is how you could actually create your own kind of unique application or model that truly no one else can build defensively. And kind of back to Matt's point, kind of be a better SaaS app experience. And then the third point I've thought a lot about is just ROI. So it has to be a part of a workflow that is, actually generating value and usurping a task that people don't want to do and or are willing to pay to do. Why law, finance, we were talking about earlier, are a lot of applications where there's a lot of rote manual work that folks would be very happy, right, to automate right out. So those are kind of three things I'm always asking whenever I'm looking at an application in particular.
Awesome. Yeah, super helpful. I think we are about to turn it over to the audience, but I want to hit on one last point because I think in light of the last panel and sort of everything that's going on in the ecosystem, would be remiss not to touch on this. How are you guys preparing your founders to build ethical and responsible AI? How are you thinking about this and advising your companies on that topic?
Cool. I'm happy to start. So obviously this is an extremely serious and important topic, and I think that's one of the most important things to stress early on, even when companies are just kicking off. It's the best opportunity that they have to shape a very ethical vision and building process. I actually at Meta worked in responsible AI, so this is something that I care a lot about and believe that there's a lot of opportunities to build startups in this space. I don't think we've even begun to see the guardrails and products that are needed to really do this appropriately. But ultimately, as we look for those opportunities, I think the best process today, at least that I really recommend and push on founders, is to build very systematically and think through unit testing, model evaluation, think through use cases and the way that this will be deployed in real scenarios. And that's a big aspect of data science and machine learning. And building that in as a good, consistent feedback loop that they can track and monitor is a really great start here.
Yeah, I just add, especially like the role as investors is making sure companies are having that conversation and are actively thinking about it and hiring in that direction. Hugging Face, for example, has spent a lot of time and effort investing in this category and actually has a team dedicated to this. And so making sure, particularly as companies scale, they're thinking about it. Also partnering with academia and folks that are actually doing a lot of the research around alignment and explainability, et cetera. And so Percy Leong's lab at Stanford, my alma mater, is doing a lot of good work there. And so often encouraging kind of those cross-industry collaborations too.
Yeah, just add quickly that I think it's particularly important that all of us do that and that as an industry we self-regulate, because I think our government is going to be particularly ill-equipped to really understand the complexity. Like we probably all saw the TikTok hearings and the quality of the questions that were asked there, and that's just understanding TikTok. So when it comes to understanding the advanced AI technology, I think we need to figure out the regulation aspect before others believe that they are entitled to do that.
Yeah, I like that concept of self-regulating. I agree with that. Well, we would love to turn it over to the audience if anyone has one question, two questions out there.